This
I'm ready.
conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Well, good afternoon.
I'll announce the names that are presently signed in, and I call your name, then all you have to do is who you represent. Of course, I know it's Brian Doherty from the MRPC. Grace Belmont.
I'm part of the
Tyler.
transportation planning team with MRPC.
Okay, thank you. Tyler Golden.
I'm also from MRPC.
Amanda Reed from Lunenburg.
Correct, Lunenburg.
Brian Cruddo.
Winchendon.
Brian Cruddo represent.
From Winchendon.
Okay. Daryl Amaral.
Here,
I got
District
that
2.
right.
Yep.
Elizabeth Wood from Leominster.
Yeah.
George from Mart. George Snow from MRPC. Janet Tice. Janet, who do you represent?
Looks like Janet's just signing on. She is from Shirley.
Oh, okay. Lori Witta from
Good
Templeton.
pronunciation. Templeton.
Me from Gardner. Ryan Doherty from Westminster. Sarah Bradbury. Who do you
MassDOT
represent?
District 3.
Say it again.
MassDOT District 3.
Okay. Sherry Bean from MRPC. That's everybody that's present so far. Thank you. Are there any public comments to be made from anybody? I see none or hear none. Request a motion to approve the July 10th, 2024 minutes for our last meeting.
I make a motion to approve it as presented.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. If does anyone want to make any corrections or comments about the minutes? I see or hear none. Then we'll consider the minutes approved. Thank you. Item number 4, a climate change program report and presentation.
Sure, I'll just give a quick
Gonna do that,
introduction
Brian.
on this. And Grace Belmont from MRPC is in charge of this program. This is through our Unified Work program that we do a number of different projects throughout the region. So I think I mentioned sometime in June or so, we'll be kind of sprinkling these reports throughout the year just to give people an indication of sort of the work we're doing beyond the federal requirements of the tip and whatnot. So this type of report will inform long-range planning done the regional transportation plan. So again, Grace has done the climate report this year, and she's here to give a presentation.
Good.
Grace, I don't know if you can take control of the screen or.
I think I can. How's that?
Looks like you got it. Yep.
Okay, let me go ahead. Do you guys have a full screen now? Can everybody
Yeah,
see
I
my
see it.
slides? Okay.
Yep.
So
I think
again,
we're good.
I'm good. Okay. So I'm Grace. I haven't met a lot of you formally, but I've listened to you. I've sat in at several meetings since the spring, and I feel like I'm getting a sense of several of you. I'm new to the planning team, the transportation planning team, but I have lived in the region had a place in Royalston for over 20 years. So this region and its byways and roads and everything are very dear and personal to me. So this part of my goal in this report is to help facilitate local and regional climate change impact discussions in ways that encourage everyone to participate in this discussion so we can move forward together. MRPC supports and is part of the Massachusetts mandate to help protect and minimize negative impacts to our air, water, soil, wildlife. And another piece of that is coming into compliance with the Global Warming Solution Act, which is about reducing and eliminating the elevation of greenhouse gases in our region to do our part as a state. So I wanted to start with just a baseline of science, which to bring people into the discussion that I've been having for years and as part of my own research and participation as somebody who cares about climate change. And the basic question is, how do we know climate change is real? How do we know what the temperature was or how much CO2 was in the atmosphere hundreds of years ago? And we have, of course, fossil records, tree rings. Humans have documented weather throughout the world for thousands of years because it's fundamental to our own survival. And we also take ice core samples. And here's a picture of ice core samples being taken at the West Antarctic ice sheet. And ice core samples have layers just like tree rings for each year. And within those layers, there are bubbles of trapped air. And so that air can be analyzed from long ago.
Excuse me, Grace.
Yep.
Sorry, we can't see the. I think you might have to go into presentation mode because we can
Okay.
just see the. Okay, now we can see it. Yeah, that worked.
Is it showing the full screen or is it showing all my
No,
other?
it's not. It's not. You might have to click the little icon at the bottom there. But we can see that you flipped
Oh.
the page at least. So
So let me see. Where's the full screen on this? I think I may be stuck in this because if I do presentation, it comes up. I see the full screen, but you guys don't.
yeah, that's okay. We can see that
Okay.
you
All
changed the
right. So
slide.
here's the West Antarctic ice sheet, and you can see samples are taken, and we actually have a whole library, the final photo in this image, where we store these samples, and scientists from all over the world can analyze the composition of the layers of ice. So that's where we get our data about how much CO2 is in our environment and has been in our environment through history. And here's a National Oceanic Atmosphere Administration graph that shows the relationship between the Earth's surface temperature from the 1860s, which is the up and down line. You can see year to year, the weather varies significantly, but over time, you can see that things are getting warmer globally. And then the second line shows how it tracks with CO2 emissions as part of a composition of our atmospheric gases. And you can see that those two trends track very, very closely. And then moving on to Massachusetts, here are our lines. The trends for temperature, which is the top graph, you can see that it has been increasing. Again, this is following the same period of time from the 1860s through to today. And then here is precipitation, which you can see is also gradually increased. So the reason we look from the 1860s to today is because for that time, things were pretty stable. What happened in the 1860s? That's when the Industrial Revolution took place. And so our ability to improve our own standards of living through mechanization, building of factories, begins to expand exponentially over the world. And that follows the same trend as these graphs. So since the 1950s, which is when we've been directly sampling atmospheric air and gas composition, we can see in Massachusetts that the total number of warm nights per year where the temperature stays at 7 degrees or higher has more than doubled. And we use that number, the temperature at night, because that is supposed to be the coolest time of day. So that is our baseline. So that's one of the measurements that we look at in Massachusetts. And again, if you look at this top image, you can see there's a jagged up and down, means from year to year there's a lot of variation, but the average over time shows that in Massachusetts, the temperature is increasing by, let's see how many degrees. I think it's, I can't read this graph, but several degrees over time, and it's continuing in that trend. And likewise for precipitation, there is an increase. It doesn't seem that substantial, but when you think from 1 inch, from about 10 inches to about 11.5 inches, each inch represent an inch of rain. I just put this in here just to get a sense of perspective. A light rain for 2 to 3 hours or a moderate rain from 30 to 60 minutes is just a quarter of an inch. So every inch that you add per year of rain actually adds a significant amount of rain in the environment. And the way rain is being distributed, so even though it's not too extreme, the amount of rain, it's being divided. We're having periods of drought that are longer and periods of rain that are more intense. So historically, Massachusetts rain precipitation was more or less evenly distributed throughout the year, and we are seeing shifts in that precipitation. So with MRPC, how we evaluate our projects and how we look at vulnerability for transportation infrastructure is one of the things we look at are flood zones, and that's what this map is. Unfortunately, the coloring is not great for getting a good visual understanding of it, but the darker green represents higher population density, and then lighter green is lower population density, and you can see where the pink is. I don't know if you look carefully on this map, the pink actually represents flood zones. So those are areas that historically have been areas of concern and areas of how we assess and recommend projects that get done in our region. And we also have a set of criteria that looks at environmental impacts that we ask and use also to evaluate projects. And that has to do with air quality impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, whether the project will have impact on water quality or supply, impact on species and wildlife, and then general impact on resiliency of the facility. Will that be impacted by the project?
What's up?
Then, so here's some of the data that we look at. We look at the table on the left shows the mileage of roads that we have in each. At the bottom, you can see the total number of roads in our region is about 2,835 miles of road, and of that road, 85 miles are in flood zones. So about 3% of our roads are in flood zones. So they are, historically, we have assigned them as being more vulnerable to flooding. So there's this caveat that's taken place because a lot of our climate, actually, let me slow down a second. I also want you to bring your attention to the tables looking at structurally deficient bridges, which of course, as we're hearing in the storms that are happening down south, are always critical for connectivity, for resources, emergency services, and evacuation. So in our region, since 2013, our structurally deficient bridges we're slowly improving upon that. A lot of funding has come into the region to help us address that. So from 2006, where we had 52 structurally deficient bridges, we have 27 today, and that's including adding other bridges that have been become structurally deficient over time. So it doesn't quite reflect the rate of work that's being done on bridge, which is actually higher than in this table. So this is, while doing this report and seeing what's happening in climate, we are having to change our climate modeling. So what we describe as a flood zone today, which has been critical in how we assess vulnerability, is changing. And some of our major governmental entities are changing, as we speak, their assessment of those impacts. So next year, the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is actually revising its precipitation frequency atlas, which will of course change how we define flood zones, because flood zones are defined by how much risk of flood within a 100-year period of time. And so what was once called 1,000-year floods or 1,000-year storms are increasing in frequency, and likewise 100-year storms are also increasing in frequency. So how we define flood zones and how we define frequency is changing. We're sort of in new territory here, and that will affect our work as planners. And on the ground, obviously, the reality is the climate change is affecting our infrastructure. So I decided to go ahead with that. This discussion about changing our flooding is looking at the flood that took place last year and impacted Leominster, well, impacted the region generally, but specifically in infrastructure, impacted Leominster significantly, and ultimately FEMA funds ended up coming in. And notably, where this damage on the lower photo is, which is part of the commuter rail, the track that was washed away, that's actually not in a flood zone, that particular spot. What happened is the existing culverts that we have were not able to handle the amount of water coming down. So the culverts backed up and sent water along the railway and washed out massive amounts of stone. And I'm not sure, I had a number, but the amount of stone that had to be brought in to repair was just astronomical. So in Montachusett region, there's 185 inventory culverts. Those are the ones that we know of, and only 30 of those have a recorded inspection in the state database within the past 20 years. So the state actually has a program now where that's encouraging inventory assessment. Is also for our towns that want to go ahead and repair and upgrade culverts that is in existence. The state knows that it's a problem, that this is a significant vulnerability when flooding, is having culverts that maybe should be opened up or daylighted so that they don't actually restrict water flowing. I also wanted to focus on some of the good things that are happening in our region to address some of the climate change issues and begin to take ownership of a forward-looking, lower emissions communities and society. And a couple of good things that are happening. A lot of you are probably aware, maybe you've gone and visited the rail trail that's the pathway that goes from downtown Leominster to downtown Fitchburg. That should be completed in the next year or so. They have to cross the bridge to get into where the MBTA commuter rail station is. Things like this are happening, expanding of bicycle systems, encouraging non-vehicular travel, which is really exciting, and also I think just improves quality of life. We have also we're not where we should be, but slowly increasing the number of charging stations. That's what the map is on the right, to promote and support electric vehicle use in our community. We're little by little making progress on there. Again, we do need a lot more work on that. And I think the last thing I just wanted to point out, bringing in because it's Royalston. So historically, our region has suffered from massive floods. These are floods. This was the flooding that took place in the 30s. I put a photo of Royalston because that's my town, and the other one's the flooding that was taking place in Royalston. And we went ahead and built all the infrastructure, which I'm sure most of you have visited, Tully Lake and the dam there, and Birch Hill Dam as well. So these infrastructure have saved millions and millions of dollars in avoided flood damage. And they have also brought in people like me who want to live in places that have these kinds of environmental and cultural resources, and also ecotourism money. So I just wanted to point out that some of the infrastructure positive things that can happen, that actually have happened historically in our region, so that we take our history with us looking forward as we develop and thinking about costs, not just costs of these projects, but also how much they will save us in money. And I actually let me back up one slide here, because the Northern Tier Passenger Rail Study, which was just completed and endorsed by you, by us, to go ahead and restore rail through our region onto Western Massachusetts. And the scenario that was endorsed by us is electric rail, which would of course mean giving us the possibility to avoid using fossil fuel to provide for regional transportation in the future, which is very exciting. So I want to, in addition to having this discussion about our vulnerabilities, is to talk about the positive things that are moving forward so that people have a vision for the future in our region. I think that covers it. If anybody has any question, let me know, and I will do my best to answer them.
Thanks, Grace. And I'll mention that in terms of these infrastructures, we've been involved in reporting trends on these over the last several years. So, we'll carry that along with our long-range planning efforts. Grace mentioned the structurally deficient bridges. One of the things that we point out in our long-range plan is whether we're funding these type of infrastructures at the appropriate level. If you remember, about 15 years ago, we had the accelerated bridge program. Basically, the state realized there was an increasing number of structurally deficient bridges, and there was a need to infuse some money for repairs. That had happened, made improvements. However, that program has ended, and our job as sort of regional planners is to kind of be like a bellwether to indicate whether we're maintaining a state of good repair, meaning the appropriate funding for these infrastructures. So as it relates to climate and rainfall and everything like that, and the issues that we saw, for example, in Leominster last year, it's important to kind of have our hands on what's going on with the infrastructure. Interesting enough, as Grace pointed out, a lot of the damage done in Leominster did not occur in 100-year flood zones. So there are unique challenges, especially with some of the less known infrastructures, like some of the culverts that aren't necessarily inventoried as much. But our long-term vision is to continue on with this report, develop some trends which will inform our long-term decision-making and things like the regional transportation plan.
Thank you, Grace. I thought that was a very informative and comprehensive presentation. Thanks again. The next one is overview of annual update to report.
So that was within the presentation we just saw.
Okay.
So we're on the next. I'll share my screen again to get the agenda up there.
Item 5 is the Regional Coordinating Council. In the handout, there was a bulletin about the Regional Coordinating Council. Who's going to do that, Brian?
That'll be Sherry.
Sherry, you're up.
Hello. All right. So basically, we're going to go over what the RCC is and does and what our plans are considering this moving forward. So RCC stands for Regional Coordinating Council, and the RCCs were created to address or find solutions to transportation challenges for older adults, people with disabilities, and low-income populations. So it involves a group of volunteer stakeholders who serve these populations or who have ties to transportation, such as service providers. And these groups come together to find transportation solutions or try to find transportation solutions to the challenges happening within our region. RCCs really started back in 2011 when Governor Patrick signed the Executive Order 530, which formed a commission to review the quality and efficiency of paratransit and community transportation throughout the Commonwealth. The commission held public forums across the state and issued a report with recommendations that included establishing a statewide coordinating council on community transportation, and then under that was form regional coordinating councils to address paratransit and community transportation at the more local level. So the North Central RCC, which is the RCC in our region, was previously run by the Transit Authority, or MART, and seemed to have dissolved when COVID hit, as well as some staffing changes where the person who was more in charge of coordinating this RCC had moved on to a different agency. So the MRPC and Shannon 9, as you may remember from past meetings, we've been meeting and holding these future of mobility meetings across the last couple, like about a year now, actually. And part of the recommendations of that group was to bring back the North Central RCC. So now that we need to decide if, like, who will be taking over the lead of that. It sounds like it may be either MRPC or possibly Channel 9. I did see Chelsea on the meeting, so that's great. And we're currently looking at some potential grant opportunities to help us get organized and move forward with this process. So that's our next steps. We're looking at applying for a community transit grant to help us interview some stakeholders, see what the needs are, where we can fit everything all together, and how we're going to move forward in this process. We're still at the early stages, but are hoping to get moving on this over the next couple months or so. Does anyone have any questions regarding the RCC or what it does or what we intend to have it do? Chelsea, if you want to chime in.
Sherry, can you give us an idea about who's in the RCC in this region?
From
have an
past
idea
experience,
of who's participating?
yeah, from past experience, it was Council on Aging's from the local communities. It was some of the state organizations, specifically to like health organizations. Obviously, MART was included. Even major employers, even though that doesn't necessarily fall under the senior population, low income, disability populations, but a lot of the statewide organizations that work with disabled populations and ADA requirements. Anyone can be involved, but it's all volunteer. It's just people who have a mutual benefit for helping people get where they need to go that meet those specific populations.
Yeah, I'll chime in that. So our RCC hasn't met since I think it was like 2019. So this will be kind of a whole new forming of an RCC, and it really is, around these human service organizations and the municipal departments that serve, again, the low-income, disability, and elder populations. So an RCC would include all of those people around transportation, but it can also kind of expand out into some other territory regarding infrastructure and healthy aging and things like that. So that's where those interviews are going to come in because it's all, as Sherry said, volunteer. There may be towns that are actually already part of another RCC or some similar group. And so the interview process will be kind of figuring out who has what kind of interest in participating in a North Central RCC and what they would want to get out of it.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to say? I hear nothing. We'll move on to the next item 6, future MTJC agenda items and schedule. Brian, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, I thought I'd add this on the agenda. We're still, as I mentioned, I think back in July, we're in our portion of the year that's relatively light in terms of official JTC business. But on the horizon, we have a few things. First off is a public participation plan. Basically, this is more or less our official procedures as it relates to public outreach. for the MPO and the JTC and everything that we do as a department. It's a federally required plan. We last updated this in 2017, so before the pandemic. Obviously, a lot has changed. We meet remotely now, basically for all our meetings. We used to, in terms of outreach, our membership has changed a little bit, so there's need for some amendments there. We used to do a lot more snail mailing type of outreach. We really don't do that as much anymore. We used to mail agendas to these meetings and invites. Us, just like everyone else, relies basically solely on email now. So, there's some minor changes that need to happen in the PPP just to clarify it and to make sure that we're including everyone that wants to be involved. We have a draft available for MPO review. However, we're waiting for Mass DOT to come up with their public participation plan, which we expect in the next few weeks, just for the purpose of comparing the two. We don't want to leave anything out. It's the same process we see with a lot of these other federally required documents that we review. There's a public comment period. We need to present it to the MPO. We'll be bringing it before the JTC, likely in December or January for a recommendation, and then endorsing it after the public review period. So that is something on the horizon, likely in December or possibly January. Our next anticipated TIP amendment, we're expecting one to come through in November. We'll present that as a draft to the MPO in November. As we typically do, we'll send that out for public comment, review it with this group at our December meeting within the comment period, at which point we'll make a formal recommendation to the MPO whether or not to endorse that amendment. This will be the first amendment to the TIP that is currently in place, the 2025 through 29 TIP. I should mention we just started a new federal fiscal year, so as a department, we're kind of starting new projects. We're starting this new TIP that we worked on last spring, which brings us to the update of the Transportation Improvement Program, as well as the Unified Planning Work Program. Again, a lot of the official business that this group partakes in is reviewing these materials, giving feedback on some of the projects that come about, and making recommendations to the MPO. That really picks up in January. We do expect, again, a TIP amendment to discuss in December, so there will be some official business coming up. But basically from January up till June, where we have plenty to discuss and plenty to recommend to the MPO, as well as we'll be giving some additional presentations on some of the day-to-day reporting that we do in terms of, like today we had the climate change program. We plan on bringing forth possibly the pavement management program that we have, the housing coordination plan that we just finished, to give you an indication of what goes into some of the long-range planning that we do. With that being said, it looks like there will not be any official business in November. Once December hits, we should have plenty to do until June. So when we come back and discuss administrative matters at the end of the meeting, it's a consideration that could be made to skip November, meet again in December, and likely that will be the last month we'll be able to skip until next summer. So that's just a picture of what's ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Next one, item 7, contract status reports. Federal Trade and Transit Administration.
So the FTA report, I guess you can consider the Regional Coordination Council, the RCC report that Sherry did, sort of an update on that. Starting in this new program year, under our FTA line items in our work program, we'll starting to look into grant opportunities and working with Shana 9 to get the RCC back together, among other things.
Thank you. Regional Transit Authority. I guess that would be Mart. George, do you have an update or anything to say?
Yes, I do have one item. very soon, on November 4 this year, we're going to be running a shuttle between Westminster and Gardner, serving the migrant and elderly and resident of the two communities. With that shuttle, we're going to run it from Broadway in Westminster, going through the Village Square in Westminster to Gardner Plaza and Super 8 Gardner. Then from there, we'll go to Price Chopper. From Price Chopper, we'll go to Town Hall, downtown Gardner. And from downtown Gardner to Walmart. Then we're going to be serving the Gardner Community Health Center. And then we'll serve the library. And from library, we'll go to the hospital, Haywood Hospital. And this will be shuttle for 7 days a week, including Friday, Saturdays and Sundays. Hopefully, people will use it to get around. People, they want to go to work, churches, shopping, hospital, clinic center, as you name it. That's what I have. Thank you. Any question?
Thank you, George.
Okay.
As I understand it, the fares are free, right?
Yes, and it's going to continue all the way to end of June 25, hopefully forever.
Thank
Yes.
you. Are there any questions more for George? Any at all? I hear none, so the next item is Mass Department of Transportation, 3C.
So this again is we use
Any
as
comment?
a chance to update the group on some of the things that we're doing as a department and as an agency. There's a few handouts that I put in the folder. The first is a survey. This is a handout of a survey which will inform a joint effort currently being undertaken by the Planning and Development Department at MRPC, along with Central Mass Regional Planning down in Worcester and Northeast Connecticut Council of Governments on a climate action plan. Basically, a little background: CMRPC got a grant, pollution reduction grant, which enables them to create a climate action plan, which will try to identify some short-term measures to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. And as part of this whole process, they have a survey out currently right now. You can see the link in the handout, as well as some additional information and the other links in the handout as well. The other item I have, if you remember back in September, I reached out to the group and invited JTC members to attend the MPO meeting, which we had a presentation on the Northern Tier Passenger Rail Study recently done by Mass DOT. This is in draft form right now, out for public comment up until October 12th. Basically, this is a feasibility study by Mass DOT of extending the commuter rail service from where it terminates currently in West Fitchburg at the Wachusett station all the way out to North Adams, and ultimately, in some scenarios that they looked at, to Albany, New York. So this is a service that last existed in the 50s. MRPC and staff from our department have been involved in the project as sort of a working group over the last few years. So we've been advising the process throughout the way. As I mentioned, the draft is available. You see the executive summary here. At the MPO meeting in September, we had a short presentation from the project manager of this at DOT, and we presented a proposed comment from the MPO, which you see here. I sent this out earlier in the week for review for people. I just want to give everyone an opportunity to not only read the study, but also the official MPO comment, which hasn't been sent yet. Still considered draft. And as I mentioned, the comment period ends this Saturday. So likely I'll send this over to Mass DOT on Friday. If there's any questions on this or comments or anything, feel free to reach out to me or by all means, Mass DOT. It's a pretty good study. There's a lot of analysis that went into it, a lot of useful things that we'll be able to use in our long-range planning. So we're fortunate to have it. And that's sort of what we did in September with the MPO. Thank you all for those of you who attended that meeting and provided feedback up to this point. So that's what I have for that.
Thank you, Brian. Item 8, administrative matters. Next meeting, MJTC meeting. I believe Brian mentioned there was no need to meet in November. So I look on the December calendar and it's December 11th on a Wednesday would be our next meeting. I believe I'm correct and right, Brian?
Yep, that's what I have too. And if for some reason a tip amendment or some official business that we would need to discuss in November comes up, I'll reach out to the group and plan the November meeting. But if the group wishes, we can skip November. Likely the last skip month up until next summer and meet in December 11th.
Very good. Next item is adjournment. Before that, does anyone have any comments about anything that they would like to talk about? Hearing none, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, George. And I'll second that motion. Does anyone want to object to adjourning? I see or hear none. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye.